I was once a rising star in the regional MMA circuit, with a 15-2 record and a shot at the big leagues. My wife Samantha and I had been married for 5 years, and I thought we had it all. The nice house in the suburbs, weekend getaways, and plans for starting a family after my next big fight. But then something changed. The way she guarded her phone, the late-night texts, the sudden girls' nights that never happened before. I just never imagined my opponent, Jason Rivers, would be the reason my life fell apart. Before I continue this story that changed my life forever, tell me where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to fight for what matters most to you. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Detroit, Michigan. My dad worked at the auto plant, and my mom was an elementary school teacher. They always supported my athletic pursuits, even though they worried when I started fighting. I was always the kid who could not sit still playing every sport available until I discovered mixed martial arts in college. Something about the discipline, the strategy, and the raw competition spoke to me in a way nothing else had before. After graduating with a business degree I barely used, I committed to fighting full-time. The early years were tough, eating ramen noodles and working security at nightclubs to pay for training. But slowly, I built my reputation. 15 wins, 2 losses. And now at 32 years old, I was on the verge of breaking through to the next level. One more impressive win, and I could land a contract with one of the major promotions. I met Samantha 7 years ago at the local gym where I trained. She taught yoga classes 3 days a week, and I would always find myself scheduling my workouts around her teaching schedule. With her long auburn hair and infectious laugh, she caught my attention immediately. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to talk to her beyond just saying hello. Our first date was a disaster. I took her to this fancy restaurant downtown trying to impress her, but the place was pretentious and overpriced. We ended up leaving halfway through dinner and finding a food truck that sold the best tacos in the city. We sat on a park bench eating street food in our nice clothes, and I knew she was special when she said it was the best date she had ever been on. After 2 years of dating, I proposed during a hike to her favorite overlook spot. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just close friends and family. For 5 years, our marriage had been solid as a rock. Samantha supported my fighting career wholeheartedly, never complaining about my strict training schedules or the financial uncertainty. She would sit in the front row at every fight, usually covering her eyes during the worst moments, but always there. My daily routine was brutally consistent. Wake up at 5 in the morning, protein. Shake 5-mile run, breakfast, gym training from 9 until noon. Lunch, rest, evening, training session, dinner review, fight footage, bed by 10. Repeat. The life of a fighter is monotonous, but necessary. You cannot be great without absolute dedication. My coach Tony had been with me from my first amateur fight. A former fighter himself who never quite made it to the big time, he poured all his knowledge and dreams into his fighters. More like a father to me than a coach, especially after my dad passed away 3 years ago from heart complications. Tony believed in me when nobody else did. When my manager called about the fight with Jason Rivers, I recognized it immediately as the opportunity I had been waiting for. Rivers was a 28-year-old undefeated prospect with a flashy style and a big mouth. He had built a following on social media with his trash-talking and highlight reel knockouts. The regional promotion was billing it as the fight of the year. The winner would almost certainly get a call from the major leagues. My friend Derek had been helping manage my career since we were roommates in college. He handled the business side of things, negotiating contracts and lining up sponsors while I focused on the fighting. When he called to tell me about the Rivers fight, he was ecstatic. The purse was the biggest of my career, and the exposure would be massive. It was around that time I first noticed changes in Samantha. She became less interested in discussing my training or upcoming fights. When I would talk about Rivers, she would quickly change the subject. I figured she was just tired of the fight life, or worried about this particularly dangerous opponent. Several times I caught her texting late at night, quickly turning her phone over when I entered the room. During our weekly date night at our favorite Italian restaurant, she barely touched her food and seemed distracted. When I asked what was wrong, she blamed it on trouble with a difficult client at the boutique fitness studio she now managed. I believed her despite the nagging feeling that something else was going on. I was too focused on the biggest opportunity of my career to see what was happening right under my nose. I remember telling Derek about my concerns one day after training. He suggested I was just projecting my pre-fight anxiety onto my relationship. That made sense to me at the time. I had always been one to overthink things before a big fight. I convinced myself everything was fine and doubled down on my preparation. I should have trusted my instincts. 3 weeks before the fight, Samantha started going out more frequently with her friends. Girls' nights, that used to happen once a month, were now occurring 2 or 3 times a week. She bought new clothes, changed her hairstyle, and wore makeup even on days she did not work. When I asked about these changes, she said she was just trying to break out of her routine that she felt like she had been in a rut. One evening after a particularly brutal training session, I came home early because Tony could see I was overtrained and needed rest. The house was empty even though Samantha had told me she would be home working on the studio schedule. I called her, and she answered with noise in the background that sounded like a restaurant or bar. She seemed startled to hear from me, and said she had met a friend for a quick dinner. She would be home soon. While showering, I heard her phone buzz several times on the bathroom counter. I am not proud of what I did next, but my suspicions had been growing daily. I checked her phone, and saw a text message preview from someone saved simply as J. It read, "Only saw the message now. Can you meet again, Tomo?" The message cut off there. I put the phone back, sick to my stomach, but still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a new client or colleague. The next morning I tried to focus on training, but my mind kept wandering. Tony noticed immediately and pulled me aside. He had been through his own divorce years ago and recognized the signs of personal trouble. I confided my suspicions, and he gave me advice I should have taken: confront her directly, and get the truth before it affected my performance. Instead, I decided to compartmentalize, lock the personal issues away, and focus solely on preparing for Rivers. That became increasingly difficult as the promotion ramped up the pre-fight hype. Rivers gave interviews talking about how he would expose me as a fraud, how my time was over before it even began. There was something personal about his trash talk, something that went beyond the usual pre-fight promotion. In one interview, he made a comment about taking everything I thought was mine. At the time, I assumed he meant my potential contract with the bigger promotion. A week before the fight, we had the official press conference. Rivers showed up late, dressed like he was going to a nightclub, all swagger and arrogance. When we faced off for the promotional photos, he smirked at me with a look that seemed to contain a secret joke at my expense. He whispered something too quiet for the microphones to pick up. "She will be watching me win, not you." I almost lost it right there, but I did not yet understand the full meaning of his words. I thought it was just more generic trash talk. That night, Samantha told me she might not make it to the fight because the studio had scheduled a special weekend workshop that she could not miss. In 5 years, she had never missed a single one of my fights. Something was very wrong. The next day, I decided to follow her after she left for work. I felt terrible doing it, but I needed to know the truth. I watched her drive not to the fitness studio, but to an upscale hotel downtown. My heart pounded as I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Jason Rivers pulled up in his flashy sports car. My stomach dropped as I watched them embrace in the hotel lobby, a kiss that was anything but friendly, before they disappeared inside together. I sat in my car for an hour, completely numb. The woman I loved and the man I was supposed to fight in 6 days. The betrayal was almost too much to process. I drove to Derek's apartment in a daze and told him everything. We spent the next few hours gathering evidence, checking her email on our shared computer at home, finding hotel receipts, and recovering deleted text messages. The affair had been going on for 3 months, starting after Rivers saw Samantha at one of my fights and contacted her through social media. Even worse, I discovered that Rivers had specifically requested to fight me after learning I was Samantha's husband. He had taken the fight not just as a career move, but as some kind of twisted power play to humiliate me professionally while sleeping with my wife. That night, I stayed at Derek's place, unable to face going home. My world had collapsed, and I had a career-defining fight in less than a week. I considered pulling out, but that would mean Rivers won on every level. I had never felt so betrayed, or so determined in my entire life. I returned home the next morning to find Samantha acting completely normal, making breakfast as if everything was fine. I laid the evidence on the kitchen table: hotel receipts, screenshots of text messages, everything we had found. At first, she tried to deny it, claiming I had misunderstood or that the evidence was fabricated. When she realized I had seen them together at the hotel with my own eyes, her denial crumbled. She broke down crying, admitting to the affair, but blaming me for being absent, too focused on my fighting career and not enough on our marriage. She claimed Jason made her feel special, that he listened to her in ways I no longer did. Each word was like a knife, twisting deeper. The worst part was hearing her defend him, saying he truly cared for her, that their connection was real. I lost control in a way I never had before, punching a hole through the drywall of our kitchen. I had never raised my voice to Samantha in all our years together, but I found myself shouting, releasing all the pain and betrayal. I grabbed my gym bag and left, before things escalated further, driving aimlessly around the city for hours. Eventually, I ended up at the gym. It was closed, but I had keys. I wrapped my hands and started hitting the heavy bag in the dark, alone with my thoughts. Tony found me there at midnight, alerted by the security system. I told him everything, and instead of offering sympathy, he gave me purpose. He reminded me that in 6 days I would have the chance to face my wife's lover in a sanctioned fight. Most men never get the opportunity to confront their wife's affair partner, let alone in a cage with a referee. It was a chance for justice most could only dream about. But to win, I would need to channel my emotions into discipline, not wild rage. The next few days were the most intense training of my life. I trained with a focus and fury that surprised even Tony. Each morning I woke up at 4 instead of 5. I ran 8 miles instead of 5. I added extra training sessions, studying Rivers' previous fights, obsessively identifying patterns and weaknesses. The physical pain of training was a welcome distraction from the emotional agony. Samantha tried calling and texting repeatedly. She showed up at the gym once, but Derek intercepted her at the door. She claimed it had been a terrible mistake, that she wanted to work things out, that she would end things with Rivers immediately. But in the same breath, she continued making excuses for her behavior and his, as if their betrayal was somehow justified. Through mutual friends, I learned that she had not ended things with Rivers. They were still seeing each other. And worse, she had shared intimate details about our marriage with him. She had even revealed aspects of my fighting style, my tendencies and weaknesses that she had observed over years of watching me train and compete. Rivers was using this inside information to prepare for our fight. 3 days before the fight, Rivers posted a photo on social media that showed him training with a caption about taking everything from me, both in and out of the cage. He was flaunting their relationship, using it as psychological warfare. The comments section filled with confusion from fans who did not understand the subtext, but I knew exactly what he meant. The day before the fight, we had the official weigh-ins. Rivers continued his antics, getting in my face during the stare-down. When the cameras could not pick it up, he whispered to me, "Your wife moans my name now." I nearly lost control, lunging at him, before security separated us. The promotion loved it, perfect footage for their hype videos, but they had no idea about the real story behind the confrontation. That night, I made 3 decisions that would change my life. First, I called my lawyer friend and had him prepare divorce papers. Second, I changed the locks on our house while Samantha was out. And third, I packed all her things into boxes and left them in the garage with a printed note explaining that I knew everything and our marriage was over. I spent that final night before the fight alone in our house, meditating on what I needed to do. I visualized the fight in detail, preparing mentally for every scenario. I was no longer fighting just for my career, but for my dignity and self-respect. I knew Rivers expected me to be emotional, to fight angry and make mistakes. I would show him and Samantha that they had underestimated me in every possible way. The morning of the fight arrived with a strange calm. My usual pre-fight nerves were replaced by an icy determination. In the locker room, Tony wrapped my hands while Derek handled the final administrative details. Neither mentioned Samantha or the situation, focusing solely on the task at hand. They had become my real family. Walking out to the arena, I scanned the crowd and spotted Samantha sitting near the front, looking nervous. So much for her workshop excuse. She had not been able to get into the house and had been calling non-stop. I had blocked her number. Seeing her there should have angered me, but instead it strengthened my resolve. Rivers made his entrance with his usual theatrics, playing to the crowd, pointing at me with a slashing gesture across his throat. The referee called us to the center for final instructions, and Rivers continued smirking, winking at me as if we shared a secret. In a way, we did. The first round started with Rivers coming out aggressive, just as we had anticipated. He was known for fast starts, trying to overwhelm opponents early. He landed several hard leg kicks and a straight right that momentarily stunned me. The crowd roared as he pressed his advantage, backing me against the cage. He was fighting with supreme confidence, perhaps believing the inside information from Samantha gave him an unbeatable edge. Between the first and second rounds, Tony gave me crucial advice. He noticed that Rivers dropped his left hand slightly before throwing his powerful right cross. It was a tell I could exploit. More importantly, he reminded me to stick to our game plan and not let emotions dictate my actions. The second round began with Rivers still confident, still pressing forward. But now I was reading his movements better, seeing the openings. When he threw the right cross, I slipped it and countered with a left hook that visibly stunned him. The momentum began to shift. I started checking his leg kicks and timing his rushes with straight punches. By the end of the round, his smirk had disappeared, replaced by frustration. Between rounds, I could see Samantha looking increasingly worried at ringside. Rivers' corner was working frantically to stop swelling around his left eye. I remained calm, breathing deeply, conserving energy. Tony reminded me that Rivers had never been past the third round in his career. His cardio was suspect. Mine was not. The third round was where everything changed. Rivers came out desperate, knowing he was losing control of the fight. He threw wild haymakers, trying to land one big shot. I stayed disciplined, picking him apart with jabs and straight rights, moving laterally to avoid being cornered. Midway through the round, I saw the opening we had trained for. As he loaded up the right hand, dropping his left slightly as Tony had noticed, I slipped inside and landed a perfect counter left hook, followed by a right cross. Rivers staggered backward, his legs unsteady. I pressed forward methodically, not rushing, landing a series of precise strikes. A jab-cross-hook combination put him on the canvas. The referee jumped in as I moved in to finish waving off the fight. The arena erupted. I had won by technical knockout in the third round, the biggest victory of my career. In the post-fight interview, I remained professional. When asked about the obvious tension between Rivers and me, I simply said it was competitive rivalry, and nothing more. I thanked my team, the promotion, and the fans. I did not mention Samantha or the real story. This victory was mine, and I would not taint it with scandal. After handling media obligations, I returned home to find Samantha waiting outside, unable to enter because of the changed locks. Her eyes were red from crying, her makeup smeared. She started talking immediately, saying she had watched the fight and was so proud of me that seeing me win made her realize what a mistake she had made with Rivers. She claimed he had seduced and manipulated her, that it did not mean anything. I listened silently until she finished, then went to my car and retrieved an envelope containing the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared. I handed them to her without emotion and explained that all her belongings were packed in the garage. She could take them whenever she wanted, but she was never coming back into our home. She broke down completely, then falling to her knees on our front lawn, begging me to reconsider, to give her another chance. She showed me her phone with text messages from Rivers after the fight, cruel messages calling her worthless, now that he had lost, proving his true character. As if I would find comfort in knowing that the man she had betrayed me with was also a terrible person. I told her calmly that trust once broken could never be fully repaired, that I deserved better than what she had done to me, that no explanation or excuse could justify her betrayal. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, harder than any fight, to stand firm as the woman I had loved for 7 years begged for forgiveness. But I knew it was the right decision for my future. Derek arrived as planned 30 minutes later to ensure everything went smoothly. Samantha eventually accepted that my decision was final and began loading her things into her car, still crying. I went inside, closed the door, and sat alone in the empty house that had once been full of dreams and plans. It felt both terrifying and liberating. The days that followed were a blur of congratulations for the fight and condolences from those who learned about my marriage. Tony and Derek took shifts staying with me to ensure I was never alone with my thoughts too long. Other friends from the gym brought food, offered support, kept me busy with training and social activities. Rivers had disappeared from social media, after his loss apparently leaving town to lick his wounds. Samantha's attempts to reconcile grew increasingly desperate. She sent emails, left voicemails, sent friends to speak on her behalf. She even showed up at my gym during training sessions, causing scenes that required Derek to intervene. I maintained no contact except through my lawyer, proceeding steadily with the divorce. The final confrontation came 3 weeks after the fight. I was leaving a sponsorship meeting downtown when Samantha appeared, literally dropping to her knees in the middle of a crowded sidewalk, begging loudly for forgiveness, creating a public spectacle. Strangers stopped to watch the drama unfold. It was her last desperate attempt to force a response from me. I helped her to her feet, looked her in the eyes, and spoke just loud enough for her to hear. "I forgive you, but I will never take you back. Our story is over. Please respect that and move on with your life, as I am trying to do with mine." Then I walked away, not looking back, even as she called my name. It was the last time I spoke to her directly. 6 months later, my life had transformed completely. The divorce was finalized with a settlement that was fair, despite Samantha's initial attempts to take half of everything. My victory over Rivers had indeed caught the attention of the major promotions, and I signed a contract that would secure my financial future. 3 fights later, I won the championship belt in my weight class. Rivers never recovered from our fight. He lost his next 2 bouts badly, and then faded into obscurity, moving to the West Coast to train with a different team. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Samantha had a brief toxic relationship after our separation that ended badly. I felt no satisfaction in hearing about their misfortune, only relief that they were both out of my life. The healing process was neither quick nor easy. I worked with a therapist who specialized in trauma and betrayal, learning to process my anger in healthy ways. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during my marriage. I even started a small youth program at my gym, teaching discipline and self-respect to kids who reminded me of my younger self. Dating again happened gradually. A coffee here, a dinner there. I was transparent about my past without dwelling on it. I learned to recognize red flags I had previously ignored. Trust came slowly, but it did come. I did not let one person's betrayal poison my view of all relationships, though the temptation to do so was strong at times. The experience changed me in unexpected ways. I became more compassionate toward others facing personal struggles. I developed deeper friendships, no longer keeping people at a distance. My fighting style evolved too, becoming more patient and strategic, less reliant on raw aggression. Commentators noted that I fought with a new level of maturity and composure. Eventually, I moved to a new city for better training opportunities, keeping only my closest friends from my old life. The fresh start helped enormously. In a strange way, I came to recognize that the collapse of my marriage had forced growth that might never have happened otherwise. The betrayal that once defined my days now felt like a chapter in a longer story, important, but no longer all-consuming. I forgave Samantha not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying anger would only have weighed me down. Forgiveness did not mean reconciliation or forgetting, just refusing to let bitterness take root. Some days were still difficult, especially anniversaries, or when something triggered a memory, but those moments became increasingly rare. The greatest lesson I learned was that true strength comes from within, not from others' validation. I had believed my worth was tied to Samantha's love or professional success, but neither defined me. The man who emerged from that crucible was more complete, more self-aware, and ultimately happier than the man who entered it. Have you ever had to reinvent yourself after betrayal? What helped you move forward when everything felt broken? Leave your story in the comments below. This community has been incredibly supportive, and sharing our experiences helps everyone heal. Do not forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that there is life after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, sometimes losing what you thought you needed opens the door to what you truly deserve.